People say time heals all wounds, but they've never lived through the kind of night I did. I was just a young girl in Detroit, dreaming of a better life, when my mother made a choice that would haunt me forever. She swore it was the only way to save my brother's life. But the cost was me. I can still hear the rain that fell that night, feel the cold air against my skin, and see the look in her eyes when she told me what I had to do. I thought I understood pain, but by the time I walked back through our front door, I realized I had no idea what pain really was. And nothing, not even love, would ever be the same again. Please, before we start, I'm asking from my heart, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means more than you know, and it helps me keep sharing these stories with you. You might think you know what pain is, but some nights teach you lessons that no words can describe. I was just a girl in Detroit, dreaming of a life bigger than the cramped apartment I grew up in, when my world began to change in ways I never imagined. Life in Detroit wasn't easy. The streets were rough, the summers sticky and heavy, and the nights long and unforgiving. My mother worked tirelessly, trying to keep us fed and safe, juggling jobs that barely paid the bills. And for a while, we managed, until my little brother came along, sick from the day he was born. The doctors called it mitochondrial myopathy, a rare disease that slowly stole his strength and left him weak, tired, and in constant pain. I watched my mother fight every day for us. She scraped together every penny, worked until her body ached, and never complained. But even her courage had limits. When my brother's condition worsened, there was no money left for the hospital bills. The fear in her eyes told me everything. She didn't know what to do, and neither did I. It was in that desperation that our lives took a turn that would haunt me forever. My mother believed she was saving my brother, doing what she thought was the only thing she could. But what she asked of me, it wasn't something anyone should ever have to face. That night changed everything. It took my innocence, my trust, and the life I thought I would have. And by the time it was over, I realized nothing would ever be the same again. Not my brother, not my mother, and certainly not me. I know this story sounds shocking, but life doesn't wait for you to be ready. Sometimes it throws you into situations that feel impossible. And survival is a lesson no one can teach you. You have to learn it yourself. What happened next? How I endured, how I survived, and what became of the person I was. That's what I'm going to tell you. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand just how far someone can go to survive, even when the world seems determined to break them. Before my life was shattered, there was a time when hope seemed just within reach, or at least, that's what my mother believed. She worked nights at a small bar in Detroit, carrying trays of drinks and smiles for strangers who didn't care about her dreams or her struggles. Life was hard, but she kept moving forward, believing that one day things might change. And then he walked in. He wasn't like anyone we had ever known. Tall, confident, wearing a navy suit that smelled of expensive cologne. He had a smile that made people trust him without thinking twice. The kind of smile that hides everything behind it: charm, wealth, and a plan. My mother was cautious, but she was also human. And when a man like that tells you that he sees your worth, it's hard not to believe him. That night, he promised her a better life. A home where she wouldn't have to worry about rent. A future where her children could be safe. Where her hard work would finally mean something. For a brief moment, she dared to imagine that her dreams might actually come true. It was only one night, but that night brought me into this world. My father, or the man who would pretend to be my father, vanished from our lives soon after, leaving my mother with a small taste of what could have been, and a hope that never fully faded. For a few years, she tried to forget, focusing on raising me, working tirelessly, and keeping our lives together as best she could. But life has a way of circling back to the past when you least expect it. 5 years later, he returned not to make amends, but to manipulate her once more. That night, he tricked my mother, and my little brother, Eli, was born. Eli came into the world fragile and sickly, and from the very start, he carried a burden none of us could lift. The disease that clung to him, mitochondrial myopathy, was cruel and unrelenting, and with his illness came a reality my mother had never faced before. She couldn't protect us from everything, no matter how hard she tried. That was the beginning of the nightmare. The choice my mother would make to try and save him would change all our lives forever. And soon, I would learn that some promises aren't meant to be kept, and some people are willing to destroy others to satisfy their own desires. After my little brother was born, our lives changed in ways I could never have imagined. My father, the man who had promised my mother the world, disappeared completely. One day he was there, the next he was gone, leaving nothing behind but empty words and broken hope. My mother tried to make sense of it, tried to convince herself that somehow he would come back. But deep down, we both knew that he never would. Life became a constant struggle. My mother worked multiple jobs, cleaning offices during the day and waiting tables at night, barely making enough to cover rent, food, and my brother's mounting medical bills. There were nights when we went to bed hungry, our stomachs aching, and my mother would hold us close, whispering that everything would be okay, even though I could see the exhaustion etched into her face. Eli, my little brother, was different from other kids. His body was weak, his muscles frail, and the doctor's words were always heavy with worry. They said his condition, mitochondrial myopathy, was rare, progressive, and costly to treat. But my mother had no money for the expensive treatments he needed. No safety net, no one to turn to. She did what she could, giving him love, care, and hope. But it wasn't enough to stop the disease from slowly taking hold of his body. I remember feeling so helpless as a child. I wanted to protect him, to take some of his pain away, but I was too small, too powerless. Watching him struggle to do things other children could do effortlessly tore me apart. And yet, we all had to keep going. We had no choice. Those years were filled with exhaustion, fear, and quiet suffering. Every day was a battle to survive, to make ends meet, to keep our family together despite the odds stacked against us. And all the while, my mother carried a secret weight on her shoulders, a desperate, impossible choice that she believed could save Eli, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. Little did I know, that choice was coming sooner than any of us could have imagined, and it would change the course of our lives, forever testing our limits, our morality, and our very humanity. By the time Eli turned 15, it was clear that his illness was no longer something we could manage at home. Mitochondrial myopathy had grown stronger, more unforgiving, slowly taking away the strength in his arms, the energy in his legs, and the joy from his eyes. Simple things that other kids took for granted, walking to school, climbing stairs, even laughing freely, became mountains he couldn't climb. I watched my brothers struggle every day, and it felt like life was playing a cruel joke just to see how much a family could endure. The doctors gave us warnings in hushed tones. Without urgent treatment, without costly medication and therapies, he might not see another birthday. But there was no money. Not even close. Every time I heard the cost of care, my chest tightened, and I felt the hopelessness settling over our small apartment like a suffocating shadow. My mother tried everything. She picked up extra shifts, sold anything she could, and begged for help wherever she could think to turn. But Detroit in those days didn't have much mercy for struggling families, and the rich didn't notice the poor, or if they did, they looked the other way. Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, listening to my brother coughing softly in the next room, his breaths shallow and uneven, and wonder if we were losing him already. Desperation began to eat at my mother's heart. She had always been strong, always been determined, but even the strongest people have limits. She spent hours pacing the apartment, wringing her hands, whispering prayers that she thought no one could hear. And somewhere in that quiet, the idea of asking for help from someone powerful, someone wealthy, someone who could afford what we could not began to take shape. Little did I know that the person she would turn to wasn't just rich. He was ruthless, and the help he offered would come at a price so high, so unimaginable, that it would forever scar my life and shatter the fragile remnants of our family. That night, the air in our apartment felt heavier than ever, carrying the weight of a choice that no child should ever have to face. And while my mother thought she was saving Eli, she was setting a chain of events into motion that none of us could escape. When Eli's condition worsened, my mother reached a point she had never imagined she would. Every night, she watched him struggle to breathe, his frail body trembling with effort, and the fear in her eyes grew heavier than any weight I had ever seen. She had tried everything, working extra jobs, begging for help, even selling what little we owned, but it was never enough. Time was running out, and she couldn't face losing him. That's when she remembered him, a man she had once known, someone who had wealth beyond measure, someone who could make the impossible happen. Mr. Clayton, a billionaire who lived in the high-rise towers far above our struggling neighborhood. She ran to him, desperation shining in every step, hope mixed with shame in every word. She begged for his help, told him about Eli, and pleaded for a chance to save my brother's life. He listened silently, leaning back in his expensive leather chair, and when he finally spoke, his words cut sharper than any blade. He would help, but only on one condition. It was a condition no mother should ever hear, and certainly no child should ever have to face. My mother's heart froze as the man outlined what he wanted in return. I didn't know the full details at the time, I just remember the look on my mother's face. Desperation, fear, and a kind of silent pleading that I would never forget. She hesitated, trembling, knowing what the price meant, but thinking only of Eli's life. And in that moment, she made a choice. She agreed. The agreement was set. My mother believed she was saving my brother, and I, too young and naive to understand fully, only sensed the tension in the air, the fear, the shame, the way hope and horror were intertwined in a single impossible decision. Little did I know that one desperate act meant to save a life would leave scars that never truly healed. It would teach me about betrayal, about sacrifice, and about the cruel ways life tests the people we love most. And it would set me on a path from which there was no turning back. From that moment, nothing in our world would ever feel safe again. The line between survival and pain had been crossed, and we were trapped on the other side. The night came quietly, almost as if the city itself knew what was about to happen. I remember walking through the streets of Detroit, the lights reflecting off wet asphalt, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. I didn't fully understand what was coming, only that my mother's promise to save my brother had put me on a path I could never return from. When I arrived at Mr. Clayton's towering building, the opulence of his world hit me like a wall. Polished floors, sparkling chandeliers, and the faint smell of expensive cologne in the air, everything screamed wealth and power. And yet, despite all that luxury, there was a coldness there, a cruelty hidden behind every polished surface. He welcomed me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I wanted to turn and run, but I couldn't. Fear, shame, and confusion held me in place. I felt trapped. A small girl in a world that was not made for her, forced into something no child should ever face. What happened that night is something I will never forget. The details are sharp, painful, and seared into my memory. I felt every ounce of betrayal, every inch of my innocence taken from me. I felt powerless, humiliated, and scared in ways that words can barely capture. And when it was over, he handed me $20. Just $20. A small, mocking gesture that meant nothing compared to what had been taken from me. I stumbled out of that building, clutching the bill in my shaking hands, and the city felt different, somehow darker, colder, unforgiving. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand justice, but there was no one to turn to. My mother had thought she was saving my brother, but all I felt was the weight of what had been done. I walked back through the streets, the wind slicing through me, and all I could think about was my brother. My little brother, lying in our apartment, helpless and unaware of what was happening to me. I didn't even know if the pain I felt was from that night, or from the thought of what might be happening to him. By the time I reached home, the life I had known was gone. That night didn't just take my innocence, it changed everything. And the consequences of that one desperate deal were only just beginning to unfold. I never wanted to go home that night. Every step toward our small apartment in Detroit felt heavier than the last. The city's streets, normally familiar, seemed alien, dark, and unforgiving. I clutched the $20 in my hand, the mocking reminder of everything I had lost, everything that had been taken from me in a single cruel night. When I finally reached our door, the silence hit me first. No laughter, no coughing, no sound of Eli struggling with his small, fragile body. Just stillness. I pushed the door open and froze. Eli was lying there, pale and quiet, the light from the street lamp casting long shadows across his small frame. My mother was on her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to hold back the sobs that racked her body. But it was too late. My little brother, my sweet Eli, had given up. The disease had taken him, and there was nothing anyone could do, not my mother, not me, not the world. I remember collapsing beside him, the $20 dropping from my hand onto the cold floor. I didn't know whether to cry for him, for myself, or for the betrayal I had endured. The weight of that night, combined with the grief of losing the one person I loved most in the world, pressed down on me like a stone. I felt numb, broken, and empty, all at once. My mother's tears fell on my shoulder as she whispered apologies I couldn't hear properly through my own screaming thoughts. She had done what she thought she had to do, but her choice hadn't saved him. It had only cost me my innocence, my trust, and now, my brother. I left the apartment that night, with the $20 still clutched in my hand. I walked without knowing where I was going, running from grief, from shame, from the life I had once known. Every step felt like leaving a piece of my heart behind. I promised myself I would never look back, never return, never allow anyone to make me powerless again. That night marked the end of my childhood. It marked the beginning of survival, harsh, painful, and unforgiving. And it was only the beginning of the journey that would shape me into the woman I am today. After that night, the apartment felt smaller, darker, as if the walls themselves were judging me. Everything I had known, everything I had called family, safety, home was gone. My brother was gone. My innocence was gone. And the $20 in my hand was the only reminder of the nightmare that had stolen my childhood. I couldn't stay. I couldn't look at my mother, who had tried to save Eli but had also made me pay a price I would never forgive. Every glance, every word from her reminded me of what had happened, of how powerless I had been, and of the life I would never get back. I made a choice that night, a choice born of grief and rage. I would leave. I would never return. I took the $20, small and insignificant as it seemed, and walked out into the streets of Detroit. The city was alive around me, but it felt distant, like a world I no longer belonged to. I had no plan, No friends to turn to, no one who could understand the storm inside me. All I had was survival raw, desperate, and determined. For days, I wandered the city, sleeping wherever I could, working menial jobs, cleaning offices, waiting tables, doing whatever it took to put food in my stomach and keep moving. Every day was a battle. I was young, alone, and hunted by memories I couldn't escape. But even in the darkest moments, I refused to let anyone take my dignity again. Detroit was unforgiving, but it was also a city of opportunities for those willing to fight. I learned quickly. I learned to carry myself differently, to speak carefully, and to work harder than anyone else around me. I became a shadow moving through the city, small, unnoticed, but determined. And though I was hurting, I was surviving. Each day I earned a few more dollars. Each day I pushed a little further toward independence. That $20 my mother's friend had left me became a symbol, not of what I had lost, but of what I could take back. It was the start of my journey, the beginning of my fight to reclaim my life. I vowed to myself then, no matter how hard it got, no matter how cruel the world could be, I would survive. And one day, I would become someone my younger self could be proud of, someone who refused to be broken. Life on my own was nothing like I imagined it would be. Detroit was loud, harsh, and unforgiving. And I was just a young girl with nothing but determination and the memory of everything I had lost. I quickly learned that survival wasn't about dreams or hope. It was about work, grit, and refusing to break, even when the world seemed determined to crush you. I took any job I could find. I cleaned offices late into the night, scrubbed floors, washed dishes in kitchens where no one cared if I was seen or heard. My hands were raw, my back ached constantly, and my spirit was tested daily. But each small paycheck, each coin earned, became a building block. I refused to let my pain be wasted. I refused to let my life be controlled by someone else's cruelty. Years passed, and the city that once swallowed me whole now stood beneath my feet. I had built a life for myself, not one handed to me, not one borrowed, but one forged from sweat, sacrifice, and an unshakable will. I started a small business from the skills I had learned in those long back-breaking jobs. At first, it was nothing more than cleaning offices on my own terms. Then it grew. I hired others, expanded my services, and soon my name was known across Detroit for hard work, honesty, and excellence. The woman I became was nothing like the scared girl who had been sold to save her brother's life. That girl had been broken, desperate, and ashamed. This woman me stood tall, with dignity and pride. I had turned my pain into power, but success didn't erase the past. I still thought about my mother, about Eli, about the night that changed everything. I understood now that people sometimes make choices they hate, just to survive. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it human, and I forgave her not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying hate would have chained me to the very pain I had fought so hard to escape. Now, I tell my story not for pity but for strength. If you are watching this, I want you to hear me clearly. No matter how deep your pain, no matter how impossible your situation seems, you can rise above it. You can take the pieces left behind and build something new. I am living proof. And now, I have a request from the bottom of my heart. If my story has touched you in any way, please subscribe to this channel. Click that like button so more people can find this message. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I truly want to know your story too. Every comment, every share helps me continue telling these truths, these lessons, so no one feels alone in their struggle. You've walked this journey with me from darkness to light. Now, let's walk together into a future where our scars are not signs of defeat, but marks of survival.